Hi, everybody. Welcome back. All right. I'll read you a poem. The title is "And He is With Us." Totally unexpected, my guest arrived. Who is it? Asked my heart. The face of the moon, said my soul. As he entered the house, we all ran into the street, madly looking for the moon. I'm in here, he was calling from the inside. But we were calling him outside, unaware of his call. A drunken nightingale is singing in the garden, and we are cooing like doves. Where? A crowd formed. Where's the thief? And the thief among us is saying, yeah, where's the thief? All our voices become mixed together, and not one voice stood out from the others. And he is with you means he is searching with you. He is nearer to you than yourself. Why look outside? Be like melting snow. Wash yourself of yourself. With love, your inner voice will find a tongue, growing like a silent white lily in your heart. So with that advice from Rumi, let's begin the afternoon. So I also wanted to respond a little more to your question about time and space. From a neuroscience point of view, from a brain point of view, we can think of these basic assumptions: a feeling of being someone, an autobiographical sense, like we have these images of our life from the past or what we'll do in the future, which are useful functions to have a virtual avatar in her mind, right? Now we use the word avatar for video games, right? So taken from the Sanskrit, but so it's your embodiment in a virtual reality, right? Now, if you think of yourself as, if you think, oh, in the future I'm going to go to France, and then I'll travel to Spain, and then you have this image of yourself flying from one place to another, next to the Eiffel Tower. Well, the image of yourself is your avatar in your own virtual reality of your mind right now, in that moment, right? So we have this self-image, and then along with this self-image, we have these beliefs about ourselves. And all of that is related to certain kinds of mental activity, particularly certain parts of the brain that have to do with the creation of a self, a sense of self. And so, so I wanted to say that, for example, the sense of time and space is a constructed event. We take it for granted because it's so fundamental. But in fact, a couple of things that point out how it is constructed was a recent interview I was hearing about video games. And I'm no expert in video games. I don't play them really. But these people were saying that one of the things they're finding is that people who play video games for a long time, especially in virtual reality, there's more realistic 3D things that are coming out now, they lose all sense of time, which can be both good and bad. But because they're not getting the subtle cues that we use to count time, like the changing of the light, or looking at the clock occasionally, or other subtle cues that we don't think about, right? I was listening to this other program also a while back, Radio Lab. It's a great NPR podcast. They do some great science programs. And I think it was them, they interviewed a runner, extremely long distance runner, who got into running after a brain injury, which removed a solid chunk of her sense of self and time. So she can put one foot after the other, and she has no sense that time is passing. So she can just go on and on and on and on. One of the reasons that we can't do that is because we think, oh, time has passed, I must be tired now. You know, and she can just have this focus outside of time, because time is a construction. And so if you could tease out one of those brain circuits, that might be interesting. But at least we start to get clues on how it is a construction. And similarly, the sense of self is a construction, and the parts of the brain that cooperate to create a sense of self, future and past, as well as self and other, have been identified as being called the default mode circuit in the brain. Certain parts of the brain that cooperate to do that. And this default mode circuit is so called because it's the wandering mind in meditation. If you ever sit in meditation and you try to maintain your focus, what happens, right? The mind goes off somewhere, start thinking about something, particularly to do with you. Right? So when scientists would thought of that as a default mode, like you're not doing anything. But it turns out that you consume more glucose, the brain consumes more glucose in the default mode than if you're focusing on a task. Takes a lot of energy. Some of it is good because you're rehearsing things that you need to do or learn. And some of it is just excessive neurotic activity, right? Yes.
I'm not quite sure if you use time as a construction.
Yeah.
I guess if I have a piece of fruit and I set it out here,
Right.
and I wait for time, it's going to rot. If it's
I see. Yeah. Great question.
Time's going to pass. That's not a construction.
Okay.
It's happening. So when you say time is a construction, what do you mean?
Okay. I'm focusing. So let's parse it a step at a time. So first, I would say that I'm focusing on it primarily as your subjective experience of time. So let's say that you didn't have the usual concept of time, right? Then what would happen is that you would look at the piece of fruit on the table and say, wow, fruit. And then so-called 10 minutes later, you have to speak in terms of time. You look at it, or 10 days later, you say, oh, rotten fruit. You don't have to have the thought that 10 days have passed for you to notice a piece of fresh fruit and a rotten fruit. That's extra. See what I'm saying?
It's your subjective experience.
It's your subjective experience. So you all have the experience of, and then we'll go further than that. But you all have had the experience when you don't think about time and you're not aware of how much time has passed. Or when you're in an accident, and certainly, some people who've been in some serious events, certainly you have a very different sense of time. Right? Seems to be time passed seems very slowly. Your experience is different. And we know that there's cultural sense of time, which is different. Right. So all these ways start to explain that your experience of time varies. Now, objectively also, we know that there is no such thing as objective time. You just have to study Einstein's theory to start to become aware that time is a relative concept relative to space. And that's pretty wild, actually. Yeah. I mean, he's like very much in line with his teachings of construction. Because you start to realize even things that so-called we take for granted is very relative. It depends on the speed you're traveling at. So two people in different frames of reference at different speeds will experience time very differently. Time will compress if you're traveling very far. I don't know this properly. I have to think about it, but yeah.
So in that same sense, it could be possible then for us to actually slow down our own personal time in this sense of
Mhm.
this reality in this space.
Yeah, in fact, it's just the same kind of, the more you realize that your reality is a construction and that you have a place outside it, and then you have more freedom. That naturally gives you freedom. Right?
So kind of
Mhm.
to Greg's point,
Mhm.
biology, as we understand it, changes. And the dimension by which it changes, we call time. So would you say that it's not debating the existence of a factor that we name as time, but just bending how one can experience?
Exactly. I'm not denying the existence of anything. I'm just saying that it's all a construction. Something that we take to be fixed and granted, even ourselves, you see. So here's a usual concept of ourselves, is that we are like a particle in like a world of other particles, and we sort of have these boundaried selves and they hit up against each other. This is the virtual reality that we construct for ourselves, because we get it from our society. Our society is conditioned us. But of course, that is just one way of looking at it. That's a construction of our mind. It's not completely wrong and it's not completely right. You see? So we can have a sense of ourselves more like a wave or a field. Right? And then, of course, there's all these teachings that question that. And we all think, oh, yeah, they're right. I mean, where is your real boundary? Every breath you take is an interaction with the whole. Can you exist without breath and air? No. So where is your real boundary then? See, it's not so much like a particle, because you can't exist without the rest of the world. Right? And that is actually a very important concept in Buddhism, the concept of, interdependence, interdependent co-arising. That everything is actually related to everything else. It cannot exist without everything else being what it is. This table cannot exist without having a floor to stand on. It cannot exist without having somebody having made it. It cannot exist without you having a need for it to be here in this moment. I wouldn't exist if I didn't have the life I had, and you wouldn't be here if you didn't have the life you had. That somehow co-creates this moment that we're here. Or from a quantum physics point of view, the whole universe quantum function creates the experience, the local experience. So, what was I trying to say? I didn't forget. Can't have been that important. Got carried away there. Yes. So our sense of self doesn't have to be a particle. That's an interesting point of view that you can take on. You can have the point of view that you're more like a wave. And you can start to experience yourself like that you're not so boundary. You know, I used to do this exercise with people. I would have them feel into, just at a feeling subjective level, where the sense of self, how far they extended self, until they felt like there was an other on the other side. The self and other, or subject and object, or me and the world, right? So what, at a feeling level, you can sense, okay, how far does the sense of me extend? Does it extend, stop inside the body, at the boundary of the body, or just around me? And then realize it's a construction. And maybe, your sense of self doesn't have to have any limit.
In our session in gathering established in our devotion, Tamara led us on that kind of experience that extended our self into the center of the earth, into the cosmos above. How does that extension of the self factor into one's identity with their self beyond the survival of the body? In other words, after what we might call death. How does that work? Maybe we should just narrow that question down to Hinduism, but just for you, how does that?
Yeah, so the way to think about it is any experience you have of yourself of having any size is useful and interesting, especially loosens your boundaries of your usual definition of yourself. Okay? But then the step beyond is to realize the very fact that you can experience yourself as small and large and medium, there's something deeper, which I would say is, just to get as a metaphor, getting clearer, is like a field. It's like a magnetic field or electrical field. You know, the idea of what happens in a field is you have invisible action. Right? You have a magnet, it draws something to another, but there's nothing visible there. You know, you can write it down mathematically, you can study it, but it's invisible, and yet it has a clear, significant effect. So your true nature is like that. It's invisible. It can't be grasped as a particular feeling, a particular thought, a particular image, a particular sound, or smell, or taste. And in that context of this completely universal, whatever you want to call it, openness, emptiness, you can start to experience the unity of all things at a level of being. You can start to experience the sense of individual self arising and falling away. You can start to experience different sizes of your sense of self. And different experiences. The experience of being alive or dead is part of that process. But what's in the background stays the same. So it's really an emptying. So even the process of teaching here is really an emptying out of attaching to the limited ideas and feelings of self. And as you empty out, there is this deep silence that you can access. And that's still, you know, that's just the side effect of the emptying. But each time you do that kind of inquiry and connect to that, there's a readjustment of at the relative level of your body and your personality to be more in alignment. So even as I speak to you, there's an invitation for that initiation to happen again and again. And sometimes we formalize that in a process we call self-inquiry. We formalize that initiation into the true nature of self in this process of self-inquiry by asking a question like, where am I? Who am I? Who's being aware? And going deeper with that question. So I'll give you an example, we'll do it together. So one question that I like to use with people is the question, who's being aware right now? Who's being aware? So you're noticing something right now. You're noticing words and colors and sounds and the feeling in the body sitting on the chair or any discomfort or comfort you're having. And then simply ask yourself the question, who's being aware, or what is the nature of awareness in this moment? And look into subjective experience. Don't look in your objective mind. Look directly for the experience. And be willing to not fight at the same time. So if you look directly into experience and you say, who's being aware right now? You might come up with an answer or no answer. Either way is fine. So what are some answers that come up with? How about I am? I'll give you an answer to start with. It's part of the process. You can use it to guide the process. So one natural answer is I am. But you don't stop there. So now the first thing you do, you say, okay, I am. Now what is the feeling of that like in the body? Where do you feel the I am? You feel it in the heart, the chest, the belly, the head, the face. So try it right now. Just say, okay, who's being aware I am, and notice where do you feel the I am feeling. It's very subtle, but there's a feeling of I. That's what I'm pointing to. Okay? If you don't know, that's fine. So just notice either not knowing or where is it, and then ask again, who is being aware of the I am feeling? So normally we stop there, we have this subtle sense of I, and then we operate from it. But now we're stepping back and saying, okay, who's being aware of that? Or what is the nature of awareness of this feeling? What is awareness of this feeling of I like in this moment? And if you're confounded, let yourself be confounded. If your mind stops, let it stop for a moment. And if you have an answer, just fine. Whatever your answer is, you can ask again. Who or what is being aware of the answer? Because the answer is of the form, an image, some particular thought, image, or a thought, word, or a feeling, or combination. Who's being aware of the answer? Okay, I'm a soul, but who's being aware of this concept of a soul, this image of a soul, this subtle feeling? I'm expansion, but who's being aware of the expansion? I don't know. And when you genuinely settle into not knowing once again, that's when you get the initiation. That's Zen mind from a Buddhist point of view. And then notice the fruits of the inquiry, the after effect, the waves that ripple through your being because you did it. You could end up feeling more peaceful, open. You could end up feeling more confused or scared. All of that are fruits, possible fruits. Okay, so what happened with that? What was the experience? That's great, I get it. I shut everybody up. That's what I wanted. Right? We want the mind to stop, and it stopped. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Right. You couldn't say anything, right? The mind just stops. That is the goal of the inquiry. So the reason we repeat that process, and I teach that as part of, I have this 4-step teaching, meditation, inquiry, and working with your difficulties and so on. But the purpose of the inquiry is to bring us back to that place. And so in our life, we get all caught up in identity. And then we use this to go back there and reinitiate ourselves.
When you listed all the things that have to listen, I thought all the above.
Exactly, isn't that interesting?
It was just kind of this 30-second or minute long, I don't know, roller coaster of peace and sadness and fear and fuzziness and
beautiful, yeah. Yeah, because what you started doing is uncracking, sort of just cracking open the usual structure that we live in. You're stepping back and you're able to see yourself in a different way, right? So when you practice, it's mindfulness meditation is popular. When you practice mindfulness, you're learning to observe your mind, your thoughts, your feelings, your body. And self-inquiry is a direct path. It's stepping back directly, so you become more self-observant automatically. And also, it is confusing in the beginning because it's like you're starting to realize you don't really know who you are. And you have to get comfortable and okay. It is okay, but you have to get comfortable with that. There might be some fear of death, which is really a letting go of what you thought and felt yourself to be. And you'll still be here, just more open. So yeah, all of that can happen. Thank you. Yeah.
So, strange, that's how we felt.
Yes.
As you were teaching it. With God, you mentioned it.
Yes.
So, like,
Uh-huh.
and every once in a while you get into a situation where the problem just won't,
Right.
it won't resolve itself. And then, there's a certain feeling I get of like, okay, stop. It's not resolving. It usually happens as situations with algebra. You have to have there's so many unknowns, and you have to have so many equations to solve it. There's that feeling of when you don't have enough, you have too many unknowns and not enough equations, and you're trying to solve, and it just loops. That was the feeling that I had. That I don't have enough equations. I don't have enough information.
That's beautiful
To answer this question.
What?
I just need to stop.
Right. That's so beautifully put in that context. I love that. That's right. That's what it is. Because if you stay in the mind, it's going to keep looping. And you can get one answer after another, and you can keep asking, well, who's aware of that? Well, who's aware of that? And ultimately, you have to transcend it. You have to stop the question and say, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And whatever is beyond will appear, because the mind is not all of it. The conceptual mind is not really all of reality. It's just a tool. And so you are something that's more than that in that mind. And the mind is such a powerful tool. We're so focused into it. But it's really, you have to step out and become more aware of who you are at an intuitive level. Then the mind becomes a useful tool, but it's not limiting you. Okay. So in my teaching, I teach what I call the direct path, which has in it meditation. So any practice that appeals to you, that helps you to focus the mind and set, and there's a few that I teach. And I recommend a couple of types of practices. One is a body-mind practice that connects the mind and the body, become more aware of the body, some form of body scan. And I have a body scan that I teach, which incorporates the sense of spaciousness, along with getting in touch with the body. So part of it is that just as spiritual practitioners, we're so caught up in ideas, and in our culture, in our practice, we're not so connected with feeling. But spirituality requires you to feel subtle things. Because the way the human brain works is that what we can feel, we take to be real. That's how it works for us. The feelings actually determine is our reality testing. What we can feel, we take to be real. Doesn't mean it always is real. It's just the way we take. It's the way we take it. Yeah? Okay. And so, and all the spiritual things are more subtle. They require you to feel subtle things. So you have to have enough contact with your body and with feeling to notice the subtle shifts that happen. And then you will say, oh, I'm really getting it. Then you're going to say, if you can feel something in response to what is being said, then you're going to say, I'm getting it. Otherwise, you won't. So that's why initially spiritual practice requires getting friendly with body sensation and emotion, but more body sensation. Yeah. But then what happens is if you do too much of it, then you might limit yourself to being an emotional being or this body sensation thing, this sensation or that sensational, or looking for sensational experiences, right? But that's not where it's at. It's not limiting yourself to it. It's just part of the structure of being alive. Well, being alive, yeah, being here. And then you want to know yourself as outside of sensation. Mm-hmm. But they both are important. If you try to know yourself as outside of sensations while internally repressing sensation, then it's not going to work. Mm-hmm. So So that's one part is meditation, where you learn to focus the mind and when you focus on the breath or the body or a mantra or anything that really works for you, I would say. And another part is self-inquiry, which we just talked about. Another part is cultivating positive states of mind. So if you ask what your heart truly wants, typically it ends up with certain positive states of mind that you desire. Right? So let me ask you all. So just check in with yourself. What does your heart want? What would you say? Let's just do it together. What does your heart want? Just speak it out loud. Peace, okay. Peace of mind, okay. Right? Sleep is good. No, okay. No, that's good. The rest. You want deep rest. We all want deep rest. Okay? Right. Yeah, more often, right. We all desire things like that, right? So one way to think about the presence of the divine is that it has to do with these quality, what I call qualities of being. That's just my words for it. I call them qualities of being. Okay? So qualities of being are things like loving kindness, beauty, peace, openness, silence. And all these things have this quality of being, of wave-like experiences that are formless and soft and subtle. So when you go into space and you feel the sacredness of it, it's this feeling you get, like a sacred feeling, but this feeling doesn't have a lot of boundaries to it. And these are subtle experiences that we think of as more divine and sacred. Right? Gratitude, they're more wave-like. They're more, have to do with just being, flavors of being. They're less defined. So cultivation of these positive states of mind is part of, can be part of a spiritual practice, and they help to loosen the bounds of the self, and they help to give us a richness in our life that we want. So whatever practices work for you, I still teach certain ones. And you can use certain phrases and mantras, and you can do devotional practice and service and ritual to open the heart and to open into love, gratitude, joy, and praise. It's very important, right? And then there's the wisdom. Then the last part. So there's the wisdom and the love. The self-inquiry and all this teaching I've been talking about is the wisdom aspect. So Nisargadatta Maharaj, I showed you his photo. The sacred seller is famous for saying, "Wisdom tells me I am nothing. Love tells me I'm everything, and between the two, my life floats." So there's always this balance between wisdom and love, between the heart and the mind. Wisdom tells me I am nothing. Love tells me I am everything, and between the two, my life flows. Yes.
When you say,
Mhm.
which God?
Right.
Then you said between, and then there's this love between love and
Yes.
tells me I have nothing. definition you use love?
It depends on the context, yeah. But let's look at it. Right now, it's a great question, and that's the problem with language, right? Because words are not well defined, particularly words like love. Really depends on the context. So we use love, but it's very important to look at it. So I think it's a very great question. So the one conventional use of the word love is what you're attracted to. I love you usually means I find you attractive, right? Or I love ice cream, right? So I'm attracted to one use of the word love. And another use of the word love is loving kindness. The kind of feeling you get in the heart when you see a child or a pet. So that feeling of genuine caring and wishing something or someone the best. Okay? And it is an emotional experience. It actually, if you pay attention to your body, it starts here, right in the center of the chest. That's where it vibrates. You can feel something going on there. And if you actually look at the breastbone and you sort of run your finger down, somewhere in the center there's like a sore spot. It's the center of the heart chakra, and you can actually palpate that, and that's like a vulnerable place, and loving kindness is connected to that area of the body. And then there is the experience of love that, for example, that Sargadatta Maharaj is talking about, that is more transcendent. And that really has to do with the appreciation of the all, unity experiences, or a sense of the energy that's of creation itself. So why is there something instead of nothing? It's a question nobody can really answer, but it's really that that the whole phenomena of experiencing itself, sort of this attempt to grasp the whole. So there's different contexts. So the last part of the teaching is, the fourth step in the teaching is working with your daily difficulties and your suffering, because we are all inspired to not suffer, right? Nobody really wants to suffer. So then we can start with the suffering and use these ideas to wake up to who we are, and as a side effect, we suffer less. So that works. So yeah, you can feel better. It's okay if you want to feel good. Just we have to look deeply into what really feels good. That's the question. Sometimes we go for the shallow stuff, right? That doesn't ultimately work. But so I use some of these ideas in working with my own things that come up for me, difficulties, or with other people that I work with or teach. So I wanted to share a couple of those with you and see how that goes. Okay. All right. So what are the kinds of difficulties that you might have that you want to explore? If somebody wants to say something, you can start there, or I'll come up with something. All right. Let's talk about difficult people. So when we have difficult people, which you all do, so where we have some freedom is to work with our experience, right? And in our actions. I mean, if we can avoid the person, or we may need to avoid them, that's fine too. But ultimately, it's also by working with our own experience, so we have the knowledge of, we feel better, and we have some wisdom on what to do, for example. So what is right action? So generally, when we have difficult people, here's generally what happens. The difficulty arises in us, because, and one of the experiences in that difficulty is a feeling of smallness and helplessness. So one of the things that's so intrinsic about life and people is that we can't really change anybody. I mean, sometimes we can, but usually we realize we can't. So what happens is that when we realize that, even if subconsciously, we experience a sense of powerlessness and helplessness. Right? This also happens if you listen to the news. Right? Same thing. Right? This also happens if we have a serious problem in our life that's not immediately fixable, or a health problem, or aging. All this. One thing that's common is we start to experience a sense of vulnerability, smallness, and helplessness. We all share this. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then on top of that is our other reactions. So I'm looking at the core here. So on top of that might be some anxiety, an attempt to over-control to make the situation okay. It might be frustration and anger that we cannot control the situation. All those emotions also arise. But I view them as more surface to this core issue. Okay? But we know they're all here. They're all to be dealt with. So one thing that, for example, we could do is to start to become more aware of your experience, be mindful of the body and the mind. Start to notice, okay, what are the thoughts going through this mind? What are the feelings? What does it feel like in the body? What are the emotions? Okay, there's anger, or there's sadness. Is there any helplessness? Is there any smallness? You may or may not be aware that you have it. Right? And then let's say, yes, for yourself, in yourself, correct. You're looking at yourself. Or maybe you'll find that you're looking too much at the situation of the other person. Then you need to become aware that that's what you're doing. So usually your reactions are the form of frustration, anger, or over-control, or thinking too much about the situation that's over-control, and then or the other person, and then sadness or smallness and helplessness. And then as you become aware of those, you can explore, what if you stop making the situation and your emotions me and mine? It's an interesting idea. Once you can contact your emotions and your thinking and become more aware of them, then we'll do this together. And then you work with the question, you can work with the question, what if I stop making this me or mine?
I'm in a particular situation where I challenge somebody for what they want to do as company policy.
Right.
That person came in my face, and I went back into that face. However, the HR generalist and the HR manager was standing right there, and they confronted me for not acting appropriately. Where I was, in a sense, the reason I went confrontational is I wanted to make sure that this became, I wanted more people than just this two interaction to be aware that something was not being followed. And in the context of the company policy, it was important.
Okay.
However, in hindsight, I could have said, who? Well, I think Mr. and Ms. would like to know why you're not following company policy.
Yeah.
So that gets it out of the me or mine.
Right. Right. I'm trying to get the idea. There's different levels of me and mine. You know, we get insulted. There's the me that arises strongly. That's insulted. I mean, that becomes a source of suffering. But there's deeper ways to look at this which are not obvious. So let's do it together. I want you to think of, just start right here. Think of a situation that's a little bit difficult for you, or a pain in your body. Even if your body's hurting, that's good. Start there. Or if you have some emotion that comes up for you that you can contact easily, so you can actually contact it right now. Like if you're frustrated about something, or you're sad about something, if you're sad about something, any of that, okay? And then ask the following question. And just it doesn't have to work or anything, because we're just doing an inquiry first, okay? So we're just looking at, if I stop making this experience me or mine, then I would feel. And then let your body respond to it. Not your mind, your body. And maybe you won't feel anything. That's okay. I just wanted to try it. If I stop making this experience me or mine, then I would feel. And notice how your body shifts or does not shift, or resists. All of these three things can happen. You'll have no change, no idea, or you'll have a shift in a positive direction, or you'll have a resistance. That pretty much covers it, right? So,
What do you mean by not
yeah, you don't know, right? So, I don't want to explain it until you've tried it, because it has to be an experiential thing. Okay, so now try the opposite. And this time I'm going to have you complete the following sentence. I have to make it me and mine because. So now I want you to complete this sentence without thinking about it, and we'll do it as a group. Okay? So whatever you're working with, I have to make this me and mine because. Anybody? Okay, who's else? Yeah, okay, fine. It wouldn't be there otherwise. I have to make it me and mine because. Okay, that's the only thing I can control, right? Makes sense? Yeah.
Because someone else will decide that it is me and mine, whatever, and not, and that's considered.
Okay, yeah, because they're telling you it's you, and you have to take responsibility or blame and whatever. Okay? You have to make it me. Nothing will ever change. Okay. Right. Keep going. I have to make it me and mine because. All right. They won't know they've hurt my feelings. If I don't say anything and talk about me, what happened to me. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I have to do something about it, so I have to make it me and mine. Okay. Oh, exactly. Whose else is it, right? It's my family. All right. Yes. Confirms your existence, right, as a self. Correct. It's a good point. I have to make it me and mine because. What else? Huh? Yeah, because I'm the problem. Okay. It just is. It just is. Yeah, it just is me. That's right. Okay. Anything else? I think we're covering the gamut here. That's good. I like it. So part of the way the exercise works is you actually have to look into how you're making it, why and how you're making it. That's important. Okay. So it's clarifying really what's going on. It's an inquiry. Clarifying. You're not in a hurry to sort of let go. You're just looking into it. Mm-hmm. And as you look into it, you start to separate from any of these ideas. Not that they're all wrong, but they're limited actually. And then when you ask again the question that, what if I stop making it me and mine anyway? Just curious, what if I did? How would that feel? So do it again now. If I stop making it me and mine, then I would feel, and let the body answer. Okay. Softer. Okay, you experience softness. Okay, let's see what other people experience. Dispassion.
The shoulders drop.
Shoulders drop. Okay. Lightness. The unbearable lightness of being. Mm-hmm. Sadness. Yeah, that can happen. Sure. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so this is a common answer, so it makes sense. And partly you could do it after you could do it better because I had you first speak out all the reasons to make it. Then when I asked you again, it was easy. It just happened. Okay? It's because you could then, once you clarified how you were holding on to it for yourself, then it was easier to let go. Just a basic principle. And without judgment, I didn't judge you for your answers. I noticed how it was right. Yes. Yes, it is a kind of, not me and mine gives you a sense of attachment. Yeah. Because it's stepping you back, it's making you more aware of the impersonal background of life. Because there is a way things are me and mine, that's not wrong. So particularly if you're at a level, a psychological level for that issue or in your life or for that particular issue where you're in denial, then telling you this isn't going to be that helpful. Because you're already too busy trying to make it not me and mine. Okay? And which is trying to avoid the experience. But it so happens what human beings do, what we do is, even while we're trying to resist, suppress, deny, it's the reason we're doing it is so painful in some way to us, but it's so painful because we're holding on to it for dear life at the same time. So we're simultaneously holding on as small self, creating a small self around it, and because it's so painful, then we're trying to avoid that. Okay? So it may be appropriate to say, okay, to take responsibility, let me feel it, let me be present with it, let me, make it mine. But ultimately then it's also to step out of it. Somehow both are true. You usually get the first advice from psychologists and spiritual teachers. You don't often get the second advice, which is the not me and not mine. Right? And so what that really means is, maybe I can use different words as well. What that really means is, I know that you're associating a small self with the problem. I know that. You don't know that. And I know you're doing it, so I'm just giving you a sentence to try to work with it and say, not me and not mine really means, what if I stop being in relationship to this experience from a small self? That's another way to think about it. That's a clearer way to think about it. What if I come at it from the transpersonal self, which has a feeling of not me, not mine, not the usual me? So at certain times you'll find that it's really, as you keep unlocking the self, your experience seems to become more intense in the sense that you start to feel that fear that was just buried in the body. And it just needs to move through. And the usual advice you get is not resist, right? That's true. The resistance is actually coming from a small self that feels it can't handle it. So when you have a big experience in a small self, then you have to resist because it's going to take you over, you can't handle it, it'll be overwhelming. When you don't have a small self, you're not the wave but the ocean, then the experience can just come and move through. There's no resistance needed. So these are complementary ideas. No resistance, small self and big self, these are complementary ideas. So yes, so it isn't actually about just hanging out in this sort of no feeling dispassionate place. It's having access to it. But actually, as you do that, it also helps you to allow the experience of the moment, the painful experience that you may have been avoiding. All right. So that's a lot. So let's pause here for a moment and let's see where your mind goes, questions, and I'll come up with something. Yes. Yes. It's teachings about the nature of self. Yeah. And using the mind to go beyond it. Yeah. So traditionally in India, what you have is gatherings called satsang, which means a gathering in truth. Sat is truth, and Sang is Sangha, or Sang is a community group. And so when you have satsang, the teacher will be in front and he'll talk about the nature of the self, like I'm talking about. And everybody's listening and asking questions and having a personal dialogue. That's called satsang. In this form of teaching, that's what is done often. And then, yeah, with the non-dual teachers, yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I've studied with some non-dual teachers, and that's what we would do. Is we would talk like I'm talking, and we would have question and answer. Mm-hmm. And then some personal meetings where we work with specific things. Yeah.
Have you found in your experience with other traditions that there's a commonality between non-dualism and mysticism?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think that when you get to this non-dual understanding and you start to realize it, yeah, that is the mysticism, that is the mystical nature. And then you see how it's common in all the other things. Yeah, definitely. In Christianity particularly, I guess the teachings of John of the Cross or Master Eckhart. And now the more current, I think, I don't know these things well enough, but a little bit I know the current teachings of Richard Rohr, James Finley, as they combine, bring in these ideas into the Christian way of speaking and understanding. That's right. Yeah, the Sufism teachings are very much about that. That's why I can read Rumi's poems and totally resonate with what he's saying. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, I can do something about that. What? Yeah, the Lao chain. Yeah. Okay. Right.
What's the difference?
Oh, the difference is what the guru focuses on primarily in the teaching. So some people will say, I am initiated into this non-dual tradition, and that's what I'm going to teach about. So they're not, so it's jnana yoga. The jnana yogis, they teach in that tradition. So the emphasis is on going to be these intellectual teachings. For example, when I see Amma, she's non-dual. I mean, she is literally the embodiment of non-dual wisdom and love. But only recently has she actually started talking about it. For years and years, all she ever talked about was love and service. That's all she talked about. She didn't talk about any of these things. Not that she didn't know them. Now she started talking about them. Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's right. That's right. So what non-dual really means, the word is not two, right? Non-dual, not two. So it refers to how we naturally divide up our experience into self and other, subject and object. And then the non-dual teachings are about pointing out, continually pointing out that how that's a construction and there's an underlying reality that is not true. So that's a whole tradition of teaching. Yeah. Huh? Yeah, you could say it that way too. Mm-hmm. Totally, but there's no problem. Yeah. So I'll say it in different ways, so it gets even more. So right now, as we speak in dialogue, you're sitting over there, I'm standing over here. We're having this sort of dialogue, this dual dialogue, You over there, I'm over here. That's dual. Okay. At the same time, in the background, there's the experience of unity, of beingness. The beingness is the same over here as over here, and everywhere. And in fact, if I let the mind get simpler, then there is just one thing, there's not even space. is just one thing. And being able to touch that at any time, that's non-dual. So what it does, it softens the experience of the dual. It's sort of like, yes, dual, that's one way of looking, non-dual, that's another way of looking, both coexist, right here, right now. Yeah, it's not limiting ourselves to that separateness. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You refer to Amma as your living guru.
Yeah.
So would you have a non-living?
Yeah, actually, I was in, and I said living saint actually because she was, in my opinion, like a saint, Yeah, but there is non-living guru. I was actually initiated. I had an awakening, and I went back to India after I quit my job as a professor. I was there for a year, just traveling and studying, and then I met my teacher Papaji, and in Lucknow, and he is in the tradition of Ramana Maharishi, and he had this amazing, immense power to awaken people, and so he's dead now. So, but he would just simply ask the question, "Who are you?" He just like ask people, but there was so much presence, embodied presence. So in my case, I was suffering a lot. I had done a lot of meditation, but somehow at that point I was suffering more than I meditated, the more I suffered. There was something I was missing, which can easily happen because it's not really about meditation. It's about realizing your true nature. Meditation is just the initial tool. So I wasn't asking clearly enough the question, who's meditating? Okay? So anyway, he asked me, who are you? And then he said to me, okay, now I want you to answer, you have to come to me naked. So no clothes are allowed, which means that I want you to use no words and no ideas. So you have to remove all your clothes. But words and concepts are also clothes that you put on. So I want you to tell me who you are without, in your complete, absolute nakedness of who you are. And at that point, I just looked at him and he looked at me, and suddenly, as if all my burdens disappeared. That's all I can say. Like in trying to, in the real not knowing, I could drop into that not knowing clearly and deeply. Now I can look back and say that's what happened. I dropped into the not knowing so clearly and deeply that it totally shifted. It was like a fulcrum that shifted the whole structure of my being. And so there was this inner openness that emerged, and this energy and freedom. But it wasn't about, but that's all, but it wasn't all about that. It was about that dropping into that not knowing. And so then after that, I always had access to that place. There was still a lot of intense work to do, and a lot of, I say, I've been a slow learner. I've sort of got all the problems in the book, a lot of confusion and neuroses to deal with, and anxiety and so on. But that was really like always there after that. Exactly 1 year after that, I had a dream that 1 year ago I had died. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. I mean, not in a Jungian space. They're not very, Hinduism in the Indian culture hasn't developed psychology. That's a Western development. It's a great development. So but typically when they have dreams, it'll be in more spiritual terms, like this dream would make sense.
It's not living appear to you in your dreams?
I did last week. Not usually. I didn't feel a need to be really like personally connected with him like I am with Amma. I just didn't feel that need really. And but it was a funny. You should ask that. I had this dream last weekend, and I was with someone, a woman, and she wanted to go to satsang with Papaji. And I said, you know what? I don't really need to go, but I'll go with you. So because I really don't feel a need to go back. So we went, and he was speaking, and he sat down, and then I went up to see him, and he looked kind of more older than I remember. He was more old and tired, but he looked at me, and I looked at him, And my heart is open. I was so grateful for the gift he'd given me, and we had a tearful reunion. It's a beautiful thing.
In terms of making sense of ourselves in our place and the different positions that exist that we need to work in with them. Have you been more focused and study kind of
I don't, not much. I mean, I think it's very individual. I think you actually have something you could say about it, the way you said it. What would you say to that?
Well, I haven't had that experience
Uh-huh.
of living in a place that hasn't had business positions where people haven't. The people in India obviously experience language with people in India who look really at the state of that.
Oh, I see. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, like anything, it has plus and minus. Yeah, the plus is that although I didn't experience that because I grew up in a very Western kind of fashion, so I was very divorced from my own culture, even though I lived in it and experienced it. That was definitely an advantage. For example, my grandmother, my grandparents had to move from a part of India where they were, solidly based, because India was divided into Pakistan, and in that part of Punjab they had to leave, and they lost everything. And my grandfather died very early from the loss. My father was only 14 when he died. So actually, I experienced all the unrootedness and more that you're talking about. The lack of rootedness, the lack of tradition. My parents were not very religious originally. Now they're actually very religious and spiritual, but originally they weren't. And they were not, they were just socially religious. No, I never really got hooked into it. And I was very intellectual and westernized. I went to a Western, public school. What we call a public school is a private school in this country. And very rationally minded, so I questioned everything. So I had the same experience that you're talking. Now, there are a lot of Indians who don't, that who feel more rooted in their tradition and in their culture, and they experience the benefit of that. So there's a plus side to it, which is that it's easy to connect to it. The negative side is it limits your point of view to that. So the benefit I got after all the struggle that I had to do with all of this, the benefit I have is I'm not limited by either point of view, a Western point of view or an Eastern point of view. And I'm also don't feel rooted in either point of view, which is good and bad. But there's a way that I found a deeper root, fortunately. So it doesn't matter so much. Yeah, so that's a good question. Mm-hmm.
What other books resulted in you? Was it just the convenience of that instead of listening to the culture?
Yeah, no, I'm not particularly even attached to that. It's just, it's just definitely convenient because I grew up in that. And I was going to tell you, like, my grandmother would repeat the phrase, not me and not mine. When I was young, I remember. And she was just trying to learn this for herself, to deal with her own difficulties, because she had a lot of sadness and depression. And certainly because I grew up in that, and the real reason is I was initiated by Papaji, and that's what really woke me up. It's just what happened. And before that, I studied mostly Buddhism, actually. But they're so close. They're not that different. But not in essence, yeah. It's just more a reform movement. So, so I think there's a natural tendency, and it's in. I could teach in either tradition, but I think I'm more comfortable. I do teach in either tradition. I also teach in the True Bad Zen Center, but I'm more comfortable with this because I grew up in it. And but really, it's not really. I mean, to me, it's just clothes. It's just language. Yeah. I'll be perfectly comfortable just teaching in a using only psychological language and teaching exactly the same thing. And in essence, I mean, you wouldn't get some of the Hinduism stuff. But, All right, so as we head in, I wanted to say something more. So I was, I've been speaking occasionally. I've met a few times this researcher called Judson Brewer, who's done this wonderful research on the default mode circuit, the selfing circuit in the brain. And he's been looking at, okay, so if we do fMRI studies of the selfing circuit in the brain while we get some really experienced meditators and we get novice meditators, can we detect some difference? And he said, indeed, yeah. Well, you know, in the default mode circuit, there's the activity when, as soon as you start having a thought about yourself, there's more activity in that part of the brain. Now he isolated it that it's really all, it happens in different parts of the brain, but there's this part of the brain at the back of the head called the PCC, the posterior cingulate cortex, but it's really, like, that's the hub of it. So it's always happening over there. And then he said, well, what if we give some feedback to people and show them somehow that this part is activating, just as it's activating. And he found that if he did that, you know, people could make a direct correlation and say, oh yeah, I start having the thought and I noticed that that happened. And then even novice meditators could learn to meditate faster because they could notice they're starting to have a thought and let it go and come back to the object of their meditation. So they come back to the breath. So, and then he found that he could do an EEG study and he could detect the EEG signal. And the EEG is very quick, you know, it captures the electrical activity. The brain is an chemical electrical organ, it captures the electrical activity. And he said initially we had a problem because we could tell that this person's having a thought before they could tell. And if you gave them the signal too quickly, it was way too spooky. So we had to delay it a little bit. And so he's working on a, you know, a device that will help people to learn to quiet their minds because they can start to look at themselves in a new way, detect themselves better. So to think about it, you know, it's because technology as well, once you understand these principles, and the idea there is simply you step back from yourself and you're using technology to do that. In that case, right? You're stepping back, you're becoming more self-aware, and you're starting, usually thoughts catch us. As soon as thought arises, there's an I in the thought or associated with the thought, and we become that I. We enter that world of virtual reality thought. Does that make sense? Yeah. And in fact, the very advent of virtual reality in a world where we start to play with the idea of entering another world, and it's almost 3D, and we do things in it, will clarify this. It will become clearer to society how this is what we're doing in the mind all the time. And this is not, and we have a choice, just like we can step out of this virtual reality game and not be that character while experiencing somehow all the emotions of being that character inside the game. We have these choices and this more freedom that actually I think is going to help people to get these ideas much more clearly at a deep level, at a gut level. Just something interesting to do. All right, so let's finish up. Yes.
I mean, the practices that you get.
Yeah.
Do they help you deal with me or my questions as they come? Or I know for me, it's like I have a spiritual practice, but things come at me and it's I have a honey pot.
Oh yeah, I understand. I understand. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, yeah.
And then I do a spiritual practice. Then I gotta go like, oh, okay. Now bring it back.
I see exactly what you mean.
Do they help you just not collect it so much and like shunt it off immediately?
Yes. So there's a deepening over time. So less and less stuff sticks, naturally. But I have also because I guess I'm on a slow path or whatever, I've also developed a suite of practices that I use over time. And so when things come at me and I feel uncomfortable, I work with it right away. I don't just, and it's not just about sitting on the cushion. I work with, for example, I've developed a method of using the kinds of sentences that I bring about. So I have a whole teaching on that. There's a whole workshop we could do on that, where I use what to do when, say, anger arises or sadness arises. I do things like, what if I stop making me and mine? What if I stop resisting it? Or I have to resist this experience because, or I might do a self-inquiry. And there's all these, or I might move into a positive state. So there's these various options where I just work with it that day. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it really, not only do I feel better, then it's like, in a way, it's deepening my understanding, and it's becoming more stable. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or, just asking the question, what is the sense of self here that's attaching? It may not be clear initially. Mm-hmm. So so we could have talked about Yoga Sutras, but we're not going to. Is what I want to say about that is, so we have in Hinduism, we have the concept of karma. The word karma just literally means action, but there is a wheel of karma which is actually in line with the psychological understanding that when you take an action, there's an impression that happens as a result of that action that affects you. Okay, so if you take the action of eating an ice cream, there's an impression of the feeling of eating the ice cream and your enjoyment of it in your senses, and that gets recorded in your system, and then that recording may drive further actions. For example, you want more ice cream. And then if you repeat that action repeatedly, then it becomes like a groove. Or in neuroscience terms, a circuit in the brain gets created. But in karmic terms, we say like a groove, a vasana tendency gets created that will generate thoughts that will drive you to that action. So you'll have the thought, oh, that's good, I like it. And you go for it. Okay? Similarly, if you have trauma, painful experience, you may have an aversive kind of thing, avoiding certain situations or people, and having certain feelings triggered because of the associative nature of memory. But it's all understood. It was already understood in yoga and psychology that this is what happens. Okay? This is how the mind works. But here's one thing that was also clear to them that you may not have heard of, which is that this whole wheel, we call this the wheel of karma, that this wheel, the hub of this wheel, the core of this wheel is driven by I, me, and mine. So it's all relating it to some I, me, and mine that makes those patterns and grooves. So if you let go of that I, me, and mine, then this wheel of karma starts to unwind. And those grooves start to be weaker and weaker. Yeah, it's not what I was talking about, but that's true too. This is true. Mm-hmm. That's what I was saying, that the actions, the results of your actions, have a lot to do with your true intentions and your state of mind. So they have more to do with your state of mind than actually the action. Mm-hmm. All right. So to finish with, to read you another poem by Rumi. How we've always been together. How we've always been together. I am the clear consciousness core of your being. I am the clear consciousness core of your being, the same in ecstasy as in self-hating fatigue. Doesn't matter what you're experiencing, ecstasy or self-hating fatigue. I am the clear consciousness core of your being. That night, when you escape your fear of snake bite, and all irritations with the ants. You'll hear my familiar voice. See the candle being lit. Smell the incense. The surprise meal fixed by the lover inside all your lovers when you die. That night, when you escape your fear of snakebite and irritations with the ants, you'll hear my familiar voice, see the candle being lit, smell the incense, and the surprise meal fixed by the lover inside all your lovers. This heart tumult is my signal to you igniting in the tomb. So don't fuss with the shroud and the graveyard dust. Those get ripped open and washed away in the music of our final meeting. And don't look for me in human shape. I am inside your looking. No room for form with love is strong. Beat the drum and let the poets speak. This is the day of purification for those who are already mature and initiated into what love is. No need to wait until we die. There is more to want here than money and being famous and bites of roasted meat. And now, what should we call this new sort of gazing house that is opened in a town where people sit quietly and pour out their glancing like light, like answer? Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome.